Hello and welcome to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab,
where we engage with thinkers from around the world to explore how leaders of today can learn from leaders of tomorrow.
You're back with your hosts. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Jens.
So today we've got a bit of a different lineup. I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to flip the spotlight and to turn it onto my fellow co-host, Jens. And I'll be talking to him about his experience inside of the innovation space and why innovation is the key to unlocking business success. Jens, welcome to our Reverse Mentor Lab, and it's great to have you with us today.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be on the other side, kind of.
Yeah, for once the spotlight's going to be turned on you, and I look forward to hearing your stories and exposing some of your thinking to the listeners and to the world out there.
Yeah, let's see if I can provide a couple of cents.
Yeah, I'm sure for those of you who follow Jens on Twitter, you may have seen that he's launched a new prototype called Jens's 2 cents. So stay tuned to see where that goes, and it may even end up in a digital currency, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole now. So Jens, I know you've got a passion for innovation, and so maybe to kick the conversation off, tell us why you think innovation is important, and let's start with that.
So to get into why innovation is important, you need to understand a little bit of my definition of innovation. And for me, innovation is really a different way of thinking, a different way of enabling businesses. And of course, there's a lot focus on business, but for me, it's more a mindset of life as well. So it's not just the business structure and the element of reinventing your business, which of course, when I work with businesses, that's then what innovation for me is. How do you enable and reinvent your business in an ongoing base, and do this with ideas that you would normally not touch? So looking into and exploring different ways of thinking inside of your business while kind of innovating your products, innovating your business model, innovating your structure, innovating your culture. So that's a bit that part. Why is that important for me, and from a business context specifically, is it's like if you stand still with a business, then you're kind of going backwards. So for me, it's really my view is always that if you are getting too comfortable in your own skin as a business, then you need to move. Then you need to push the boundaries. So it's really driving innovation as a piece, as a cultural element into your business will help you to stay on top of your things and move your business going forward. And in a private environment, it's the same. So it's how can you innovate yourself? How can you reinvent yourself in an ongoing base, which some people might not see as innovation. For me, it is a part of innovation in similar ways of thinking, using different tools to innovate yourself going forward as a person in a private setting.
Yeah, and I love the way that you sort of framed innovation inside of that space and the word reinvention. And I think that especially in terms of when you get too comfortable in the way that you do things, it's easy to carry on doing things in that way. And like you said, you need to push yourself to take that extra step forward and to look at reinventing the way you're doing things and take a new approach to traditional tasks or current tasks that you may be doing, both in a business and a personal setting. So innovation is a buzzword, as many of the listeners may know, and many of those who are watching it may know. And it's often thrown around and used to describe different ways of thinking about change and leading change. And Jens, we've started with why innovation is important, and you've defined the way that you think about it as a person and the way that you've put it into practice. But maybe can you share some of the personal stories and your views that may have informed how you got to that definition of innovation and where that sort of came from, both from your experience and the way that you've put it into practice?
If we start a couple of years back, which some of the people who know what I'm doing on social media or podcasting, whatever, they might not know me from that time. So I was global head of innovation for one of the best companies in the world, a very large retail company. And at that time, I was learning to innovate inside a large organization, inside a large company with different teams, with different ways of thinking. So it enabled me to see that, hey, it's a very large organization, very successful. And if you want to reinvent things, if you want to bring new business opportunities to that business, new revenue streams, then you need to do things completely different to what you have done before. So if you take a business that's 50 years old, and then you kind of bring something in where you say, how do we fuel the business with a different way of thinking? And that was basically the first start into innovating. And we did a kind of test project in the Russian organization when I was living in Moscow, where we learned from a bottom-up approach. How do you set things up? How do you do this? How does the organization react when you infuse different topics, when you think differently? So one thing we did a virtual reality fashion show, which was never heard of in that world at that time, and specifically not for that business. And it was not about the fashion show itself. It was more about what enabled this way of thinking, doing a project and pushing it through inside the business context that enabled different ways of thinking. And then it's kind of like a domino effect, which changed then a lot of things inside the business going forward. Fast forward to today's time, or if you just take 6 months ago, where I more took all of that approach to say, I will rebrand myself. And it's not real innovation, but I took this with an innovation way of thinking as well, from a prototyping approach, which, I mean, you have been part of, which I do constantly on a daily basis, which is putting out my assumptions and trying to validate my assumption in different setting, in different ways of thinking. That can be just a post on Twitter, that can be just a LinkedIn perspective, or a series of different topics, which give me insights on what is resonating with different people, what is resonating in which way. And then I'm learning from that and taking it forward. And one thing I challenged myself early on was going into videos, because I was never comfortable with video shootings and video topics. And now, half a year later, you almost only see videos from me, or quite a lot of videos. And it's the interesting perspective as well, when you link that to a business context, is if you do things every day, it gets a new habit and you get better in it. If you just look back half a year, I mean, everyone is welcome to look at the first daily vlog videos on my YouTube account. They're crap. I mean, not super crap, but I'm not super proud of them. But if you then take the first one and maybe the last couple of, or now the videos I'm doing with the 30 seconds coaching, it's just a tremendous progress you do in 6 months if you focus on something, if you try to learn and iterate. And even if you just look into the 30 seconds coach videos, they have been like from the phone, very easy in the beginning. And now I'm basically in a professional production mode when I'm doing them. And that's basically the whole time innovating myself, but as well doing this with a broader perspective, where I have a vision behind that, where I have an understanding, where I have KPIs behind that, which everyone thinks I'm just shooting this video and shooting them out, but there's a bigger strategy behind all of what I'm doing. And that's often underestimated when you do this from a personal level. Though that I, of course, link that to my businesses, I try to do that with this 1 million movement as well, where I say, this is my personal movement. I don't use that for selling things. I use that for creating impact in this world. And of course, there is a business angle of it, but it's not the driving force of it. And that's for me important to say. If you want to innovate, you need to have an idea where you want to go, and then use that for validating your assumptions, being able to understand how do you navigate towards the future state you want to be. And that can be on a private level, that can be on a business level. And for both parts, you need to get an understanding of how do you put things together that it's going to work. And I mean, it's all buzzwords, which is like fail fast things, but I just see it with a lot of people I coach as well, or businesses. They try to do it perfect from the first get-go, and it's never going to work, or it's going to take 2 years until you get things out. I just started, if you just take the video example again, I just started shoot videos and put them out. A lot of people are saying, hey, you're nuts, you're you're killing your personal brand. But for me, it doesn't matter, because for me, I'm gathering feedback, and how many people are really seeing my videos, it's almost nobody. But if you then look forward, if I'm keeping that pace of learning for me as a person on video topics, what will happen in the next 5 years if I'm creating progress in my video production topics? I will be on a different planet, and then it's like one of the big distinctions for my business topics going forward, having like super good duper videos, I hope, at least.
Yeah, Jens, there are a number of good nuggets inside of what you just shared, and I'm just going to pick up on two quickly. So the first is navigating, and the second is just start. And I want to zoom in on just navigating quickly. And for those who are listening and those who are watching, you may not know, but Jens used to once upon a time be an engineer. And although he may not think it right now, but I'm going to ask him about, Jens, how do you think that potentially the experience that you had as an engineer and that problem-solving mindset has helped some of your innovation thinking and the way that you go about navigating change?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similarities where it's all starting with a problem. What is the problem you have to solve if you're an engineer? If there's a machine not working, or like I'm an electrical engineer, and let's say you're asked to get to a customer or to a client, and there's something broken. It's not working. And then the interesting part of that is always, if let's say if you're an electrical engineer and there's no electricity in the whole building, the arrow is very easy to locate. But if there's only a small piece of the building where you don't have energy, then you need to dig deeper. So it's quite interesting from an innovation perspective as well. If you want to fix big problems, it's often easier to channel it to get a direction somewhere than if you have smaller topics. And what I learned about that's all about solving a problem, all about how do you change something, or a state of mind, a state of a problem on the long-term perspective. That's for me as well a starting point from an innovation perspective, where if there's no problem, why should you change it? Just for the sake of changes, for me, it's not enough. There need to be a problem which guides you to how do I solve that problem. And that's the same from an engineering perspective.
Yeah, and I love that point, and we're going to come back to it a little later in the conversation, but I'm going to sort of create a segue here, and it's around just start. And the reason for that is because I want to talk about people who innovate. So what makes successful innovators, or innovateurs, as Jens likes to call them, and how can you create environments where you allow people to embrace innovative thinking and become innovators?
Yeah, what makes innovators, for me, it's like really the people who are starting with action. So you need to have a little bit of an action bias, which is like something itching and saying, hey, I want to change this. I want to solve that problem. That means I need to start doing something, not just talking. So it's really getting into walking as fast as possible. And I think that's what I've seen as well in large corporations. The people who are into that, they're on the first jump. What is important and critical is taking as well a step back. So it's being willing to walk, but taking a step back and looking into the totality. So it's not just, hey, I'm an action-driven person, I just do stuff. It's as well, I do stuff with a purpose to reach the future goal. I think that's very important to understand as well, to do going forward. And then from an enablement perspective, I think if you're in a corporate setting, you need to create environments, you need to create teams or culture, if you take the broader term, inside an organization that helps people to do that. If you say, hey, can everyone in the organization take decisions and actions in maybe still a framework or in a space where they are allowed to do it, but are they able to do that? If they're not allowed to take decisions in their job, then they're not going to be innovative at all. They're just following the orders. So that's kind of the starting point for an organization to look into. If I want to innovate or enable my teams to innovate, empower them to innovate, then you need to give them freedom. You need to give them decision powers and authority to move. And that's the first thing. And of course, later on, budget and topics. But it's really bringing that into your culture is the key from a long-term perspective.
Yeah, Jens, and something that you said I really love, and it revolves around taking a step back. And I think sometimes when you think about innovation, we think about speed, we think about moving forward, we think about doing things differently. But inside of building innovation frameworks and innovative thinking, we need to build in constant measurement and evaluation sessions so that we can, like you've shared in this conversation so far, learn from all the different forms of feedback that we are receiving so that we can make better decisions and better steps forward from the feedback that we're receiving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know it a little bit because we engage quite often. I'm measuring so much behind the scenes, and some of them are maybe, as you call them in innovation, vanity metrics, which are not really helping you to decide something. But for me, it's often as well, it's an indicator of something. And that's why I'm tracking it. And that gives me understanding of certain topics. Like, even if you just look, let's say, social media, how many followers and what engagement do you have give you an understanding of the content you're putting out. If nobody is engaging with your content and your followers are declining, then there's something wrong. You should change that. If you track it, let's say, every day, you get an understanding of what you need to do. And that's the same from a business context perspective. If you engage with your customers on a daily basis, you will gather knowledge about your customers, you understand their behaviors, and then you get basically changing your business towards the right direction. And that's sometimes incremental steps, but it helps you to get always being a step ahead.
Definitely. And yeah, something that I'm going to bring into the conversation sort of as we look to wrap things up is, for those of you for those of you watching and listening, and you go and research who Jens is as a person and what he's achieved so far in his journey and what he's trying to achieve inside of this movement that he's creating, he's got a phenomenal experience and wealth of knowledge around different cultures, around different languages, and he's lived in a number of societies around the world. And Jens, from a person and a people perspective, you've touched on it briefly around giving freedom to employees and people inside organizations, but maybe if you could just share a bit about how you've sort of gained from the lessons that you've learned from experiencing different cultures and living in different cities around the world, and how you've pulled from those lessons and helped teams inside organizations embrace innovation, and organizations as a whole really try and create an environment where innovation becomes part of their DNA.
Yeah. If you work in a very large corporate, then you always think it's the same everywhere. Like the headquarters in one country, and then you have most probably different other countries everywhere spread over the globe. And often the assumption is that, yeah, we're all the same. We're the same company. We do the same service. It looks the same. It feels the same, but it's not. It's really every even location. If you take a retail environment, every store has their own subculture. And that's very, very important to understand that and enable that as well from an organization perspective, because it gives you the opportunity of saying, hey, yes, we have an umbrella culture, if you call it culture, but we need to allow the different cultures locally. So, for example, when I was moving from Germany to Russia, what was it, 2014, it's a huge culture shift from a different country perspective. But then I was still in the same global company, but even inside of that global company, there was a different culture inside of the Russian organization than it was inside of the German organization where I was before, or when I was global project manager before, where I was basically attached to all countries around the globe. So it's very important to understand what is the local culture, how does it work, and how does, if you look into innovation enablement perspective, how does that work in the local context? And that's completely different in Germany and in Russia. But it's still, from a base setting perspective, for me, it's always give the people the possibility to decide in a frame where they know and where they feel secure and that they can decide. Give them the the means and all the possibilities to test and try and error and fail inside of their environment, and they will grow. They will take step by step forward. And in some cultures, it's kind of normal already. And in some cultures, people need to learn going into that. And that's very important to understand, that as a global company, or even as a local company, which just has different branches, it's always different. And that's what I learned taking this step back again, because I mean, 2040, I was still from a wild west perspective in the management style. I was still, and I'm today still learning, but I was having the assumption that's all the same, that I will just implement the same ways of thinking like in Germany inside of the Russian organization. But then I was quickly realizing, with having an amazing mentor at that time as well, that it's not going to work this way. So I need to relearn, I need to iterate, I need basically prototyping my way into that culture, and looking as well where I need to be stubborn, because we need to bring a change into the organization. So yeah, tremendous learnings over the last 24 years now already.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I had another question lined up around time, and it's just what you've touched on there, and you've touched on it briefly, around 24 years and the opportunities that we have to learn, and this concept of always being busy. And I think that in today's digital age, and we're conversing over Zoom today, there's important now more than ever to sort of take a step back and really evaluating how you're doing things. Is it effective in the manner that you're doing it? And definitely embracing a prototyping mindset. Not only in the way that you do your work, but also inside of how you personally engage with different people in different environments. And so Jens, with that note and sort of coming together at the end of it, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm thinking that we're going to develop this trend going in with all guests, whether we're interviewing ourselves in deep dives or having external guests on going forward. Is we've started a bit of a trend around challenges. And so seeing that we've been talking about innovation today, and how you can inspire innovation and create innovative environments inside of your organization and inside of your personal attributes and things like that, what is one challenge that you would like people to embrace and create inside of their innovative thinking?
I would like to challenge every listener and everyone who is watching in looking into what is the biggest problem they want to solve in their life. So if they can just solve one problem, what problem do they want to solve? And how can they prototype their way forward? How can they take the first step in saying, I want to solve that problem. What can I do as a single person to get there? And it's just taking the first step and saying, okay, I will solve this problem. I assume I can do that. And then I look how I can start a movement for myself, and then maybe engage with others going forward. But it's just taking the first step and saying, I want to solve that problem. It's just getting started.
Great. It's a powerful challenge, Jens. And I think, what I will take away personally from that is identifying the problem. And I think that inside of this space, is we can sometimes think, when we think about problems, is the problem may be too big for us to know even where to start. But then you follow that up with another great challenge around just starting. And so thanks really for your ideas, your thinking. And we've really just scratched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Jens and his experience, which we'll hope to build out in future episodes and conversations around innovation, innovators, as Jens likes to call them. And I'll also put Jens on the spot in some coming episodes around his movement that he's driving around inspiring 1 million people around the world to innovate. And that journey is just getting started for him, although he is close to 150 days into it now, which I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out over the coming months and coming years. But Jens, thanks again for your time. Thanks for the listeners for tuning into another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab. And following on from Jens's challenge, if there are any things that you guys feel unsure of or would like to chat to us directly about, you can visit our website, xyzplayground.com. Our emails are also in the show notes of each episode. So we'd love to connect with you, to learn from you, and thanks for listening.